Ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes, so you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, perfect for any active, busy lifestyle. Lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto meals. Based on a randomized, controlled clinical trial with Factor Keto, results will vary depending on diet and exercise. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. Choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, grab-and-go snacks, and more add-ons. Reach your goals this year with ingredients you can trust and convenience that can't be beat. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
That Hollywood and the creatives are tackling that. And these shows don't pop up overnight. So 2-3 years in the making. So that it's been heading that way. And I remember this idea that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren had about billionaires shouldn't exist, or you should tax the rich, the ultra wealthy. And it seemed at the start to be kind of radical because there's always been this idea in America that you too can be ultra rich one day if you just work hard enough and follow the rules. And that's the meritocracy. And that's all a lie, as we know, because so many of these billionaires started with family wealth, right? They're not bootstrappers. And certainly the system worked to their advantage because they got tax breaks, they got government investments, Elon Musk being the classic example of that. Welcome to the latest episode of Trailblaze, the show about the America we are, the America we're becoming, and the America we can be. I'm your co-host, Nayyera.
Hi, I'm Jamal Simmons, and I am so excited to be with you this week, Nayyera, because I've got something that I've been really wanting to talk about, and you are the perfect person to dig into it with.
Perfect. Thank you. Tell me everything.
So I've been watching this show on Hulu. I don't know if you've seen it. People are watching it. It's popular. It's called Paradise. It's got all these great characters and actors. The guy who is in This Is Us, Sterling Henry, I think his name. Not
Sterling
Henry.
Brown?
Yeah, Sterling K. Brown is in it. He's the lead character. And without giving away too much of it, although I will say a few spoilers for people, spoiler alert on Paradise. The sort of fundamentals of it are the world has ended. People end up inside of a mountain city, looks like an entirely beautiful, great, wonderful city, a paradise to live in. And it is kind of controlled by some billionaires who have created this city. So, and then, hijinks ensue, right? Things happen and people get mad. So, but the thing that occurred to me as I was watching this is I remember when, the Russians were the bad guys in movies. And then I remember when the Chinese were the bad guys in movies. And it just seems like now more and more, there are these bad boy billionaires that are showing up in TV shows. Now, there have always been sort of these rich villains, like the Penguin was kind of a villain in Batman, right? He was a rich guy.
Yeah, but nobody wanted to be the Penguin.
But
Let's
now
be clear.
It seems like these are like real people, right? Who are villains.
There's a cultural shift happening against billionaires. And it's interesting to see that Hollywood and the creatives are tackling that. And these shows don't pop up overnight. So 2-3 years in the making. So that it's been heading that way. And I remember this idea that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren had about billionaires shouldn't exist, or you should tax the rich, the ultra wealthy. And it seemed at the start to be kind of radical because there's always been this idea in America that you too can be ultra rich one day if you just work hard enough and follow the rules. And that's the meritocracy. And that's all a lie, as we know, because so many of these billionaires started with family wealth, right? They're not bootstrappers. And certainly the system worked to their advantage because they got tax breaks, they got government investments, Elon Musk being the classic example of that. And now, as we see what Elon does with government, and it's transparent that empathy or public concern is not on the agenda, that these billionaires really are in it for themselves. And that creates this massive gap between how we go through life and how they go through life. And somehow we're starting to feel culturally, as you said, in the movies or in TV shows, that we're not allying ourselves. We don't want to be those people anymore. And that gives me a little bit of hope. I think part of it is them being exposed and the conversations, but also them having left their playgrounds, right? Play with tech, go play with oil and gas. But when you start playing with public services and you start insulting the people who rely on Social Security, who rely on school nutrition programs, you're really showing not only your lack of empathy, but your lack of understanding of who really makes up the country.
Yeah, so it's funny that you say it gives you hope to kind of have them be villainous. What I was thinking, I think that for me, part of the problem is that the ladder, I do think that there was a ladder for people to come from nothing or relative nothing and make their way up. Now, maybe they wouldn't be billionaires, but they could certainly be millionaires. And that would happen a lot, right? I mean, this happens still to a lot of people. There's all these cases of people, you buy a house for, $50,000 in 1965. And then by the time you sell it in 2010 in your retirement, it's worth $2 million, right? Because that happens because the housing prices have inflated. Now people are these paper millionaires. That happens. Or, you have a job and you put money in your 401k over the course of 20 or 30 years and you look up and you've got $1 million in there. So you're on paper, you're a millionaire. To me, that is supposed to be what the story is, right? The story is supposed to be you work hard, you save money, you play by the rules, you invest your money, you do the right thing. And over time, you can build up enough wealth to have a decent retirement.
But that was the promise
to your family.
So Jamal, here's the thing. You talked about how buying a house in the 1960s, 1970s, right? The problem is in that Reagan era that came right after, they pulled up the ladder behind them. Here's what I mean.
Exactly.
You could buy a house with 25% of your income and pay it because you didn't have student loans. You were able to go to college for free. Add on student loans to become a professional. We're now told that you have to have minimum a college degree to make it in life, let alone a professional degree. So massive student loans. House prices are insane. You have an entire generation now, millennials and younger. And let's be clear, millennials are 45 and younger. So that's people who have real lives, real relationships, who can't afford to buy a house. And they did all the things that they were told that they were supposed to do. We're also looking at that same generation paying into Social Security and not being able to pull out from it because the program might not be there anymore. That is not something that we can dismiss, that an entire generation or two are growing up without the ability to economically advance beyond their parents. And also, let's be clear, we are working longer hours for less pay than our parents were. So we're doing all the things we were supposed to do. The system got tweaked and then changed and now is being corrupted, not to advantage working families, right? And it's not, that dream is still being sold, except I think now we are more clear-eyed about who that dream benefits and who it doesn't.
So, right. So the question for me is, how do we make the dream real again, right? I'm not interested really in punishing people who are rich. Like, it's fine. You made a lot of money. You did something great.
Why is taxation a punishment? Why is taxing?
I'm not saying taxation really is a punishment. You should pay what you owe. You should pay into the system. But I'm not interested in necessarily saying we shouldn't have people who are really rich if they built something that was great. Bill Gates should be rich. He built the operating system for every computer. I believe he should be worth a lot of money.
And one of the first people to tell you, oh my gosh, we should be paying a wealth tax. Oh my gosh, we should be paying for the fact that we use public services, right?
They should. But the question for me is, how do we generate the next generation of Bill Gateses, right? Like, how do we generate the next generation of people who are going to create the next magnificent thing? And then how do we make sure that people who are in working class make it into the middle class? And how do we make sure people in the middle class are going to be in the upper middle class? Like, that's what I want to know, which is about, like, how do we have an education system that allows people to be able to do that? How do we have an investment system that puts money into people who are building new products and not just 75% of the investment capital going into people who only live in California, New York, or Massachusetts? What about the people who live in Nebraska who have great ideas? That's what I want to see happen, is a country where everybody gets to be on the ladder and climb it.
Yeah, it doesn't happen though without money and resources, right? It just doesn't.
Yeah.
So until you have people who are not paying their fair share, I don't even want to call it tax the rich, right? Because it makes it seem like you're hurting people. Fine, whatever. You should tax the rich. It's the idea that somebody from a working family making less than $100,000 a year pays substantially more percentage-wise on their tax bill than any of these corporate billionaires or anybody who just decided to make their entire family wealth an S corp, because they had the benefit of doing that. They could write off everything. And on top of that, they're the ones who get government subsidies. They're the ones who get first access to government contracts, right? That's the massive disconnect.
Yeah.
So you can have all the innovation and ideas you want, but there's no pipeline of support, but they'll pretend there is. They'll pretend it is.
And there was this pipeline. And so the question is, how do we reestablish one? How do we create a new one, right? How do we harness some of this new technology, harness some of these new networks in order to fund some of these new ideas and help people create wealth? But, I just saw a poll, 2022 Harris poll, 60% of young people, I think probably agree with you, 60% of young people believe the existence of billionaires is getting in the way of their personal dreams, right? And so people actually think billionaires themselves, the fact that we have so much money that's accumulating at the top, is a problem in and of itself, and people just shouldn't be billionaires.
It's an absurd amount of money when you think about it, right? You're talking about $999 million plus one, right?
Right.
Like, it's millions upon millions upon millions. Like, we diminish it when we call it 1B. It's like, oh, it's one, right? How much, how many exponential times our income goes into just what they're hanging out and sitting with, right? So the idea that you were able to be wealthy because of all this public support, whether it be the roads that you're using, the infrastructure that you're using, any of that, and you're giving nothing back, right? We are a country that has also told people that you need to give back.
Yeah.
Yet somehow the giving back in taxes part never translated for the billionaires, right? They got the good part of the story, and that story still gets told about them, but the part about sacrifice and giving back to communities, right? That's not the Elon Musk or the Jeff Bezos narrative. Right. It's not helping, though, that they're doing it in public now. I think they could have gotten away with what they were doing if they were just happy with the power they had. If they were happy with the empires they had and didn't feel the need to start messing with public services.
Yeah. Speaking of public support, we saw quite a spectacle of public support happen this week when the president of the United States basically did a car commercial on the South Lawn of the White House with his favorite billionaire bad boy, Elon Musk. And they drove those Teslas up, and the president basically talked him up for a while. That was, I got to say, one of the most amazing things. Amazing in a bad way, not amazing like, oh, wonderful. That was a pretty spectacular diminishment of the public office of the president, as I've seen since Donald Trump has been in office.
It was one of those things where I sat back and wondered, I wonder how everybody else around the world is looking at this, because everybody in any country, developing or not, has a used car salesman, right? You all know who that guy is, who's trying to sell you a car. And then see the talking points that he had, like the sales pitch that he had. I'm like, wow, how nice it must be to have your product attacked and immediately have the president of the United States back it up and defend it. I'm like, wow, how about we do that with people's humanity, where someone's humanity is attacked and the president of the United States stands up for that? I wonder what that would feel like.
Yeah. Well, we have seen also the diminishment of someone's humanity this week also, as we have this Palestinian student from Columbia University who has basically been sent. I'm not going to call it a black site because people do know where he is. His lawyer has spoken to him. His family members have spoken to him. But he's a green card holder of the United States, not a student. They want to kick him out of the country because of his political beliefs, not advocating violence, not committing crimes, just because of his political beliefs, which I may or may not disagree with. But that's not the country that we're supposed to be in. And the First Amendment does not say it only applies to citizens. It applies to everybody in the country.
It's going to be a really thorny legal question. And it's going to hit home for me because I have family members who are green card holders. My parents are naturalized citizens. So, we are very aware of what having an American passport does for you. But the green card is just a half step below that. And especially when you're married to a U.S. citizen, you're effectively in the process to get your citizenship. And what it does is that it says that you also get you get the benefits of being protected by the Constitution. You are a human. You are legally recognized in this country, and everybody gets those benefits, which include freedom to protest, freedom of speech. So he has not been charged with a crime, which is what I think the key thing is. Because if you are charged with a crime while you're still in the process of a citizenship application, yes, puts you in a different path. He's not been charged with a crime. There has been a lot of discussion about how the protests at Columbia were prompted and or supported by third-party organizations, many of them possibly terrorist organizations. So there's many leaps of connection being made, but again, has not been charged with anything like that. In fact, when they went to go pick him up, they picked him up and said, "Oh, well, we're suspending your student visa." He's like, "Yo, I'm not on a student visa. I'm a green card holder." And I really think they stepped into a mistake here, because we know that this administration right now is not very good about communicating even with itself. And they had not realized that what they were doing was picking up somebody who had far more rights than a student visa holder would. And what it's setting up now is this idea of which people have those rights and which don't. And whatever you believe about the Israel-Gaza war, you want, for your own safety, to really, really believe that if you have legal status in the United States, you're a permanent resident in the United States, that you also get the rights of the Constitution, because that is a very slippery slope, especially since, again, he has not been charged with a crime.
That is the danger. And the whole point of the ACLU and organizations like that is that we defend people even when we disagree with them. You know, I was in college and I remember there being a Ku Klux Klan rally down the streets of Atlanta, and the spectacle of particularly these African-American police officers lining the streets of Atlanta, protecting these Ku Klux Klan members who didn't even think that those men and women should even be police officers. But that is an America where you say values matter more than anyone's political position in the short term. And it's rapidly becoming a thing of the past and not something that we can look forward to.
And that's, you talk about innovation, opportunity. That's the ethos. That's the idea of America that I want to maintain and that I want to renew, which is that if you are here and you are here in some version of being part of the American fabric, you will be respected for your humanity. And that is what allows you to make all these amazing contributions to society, right? Not
so
that
that's
you were...
the thing for the good that's the thing for the good billionaires to be talking about, right? So the people who think that they are, fighting for the right thing, the Jay-Z's of the world, the people who are maybe like the baby billionaires, I think they're called, the ones who have less than like $5 or $6 billion. Put that money to use to protect people who are trying to stand up for American values. Because the truth is, every time we've ever tested our values, it's not been when there's like a textbook case. There's not just some pristine person who's like sitting there who we're all going to rally around. It's usually somebody who we could dig up some dust on and put on their shoes if we wanted to. But that's the whole point about testing the Constitution. It's not supposed to be for everybody you agree with. It's supposed to be for the people you disagree with too.
It's literally the way that we function when we don't agree on things is constitutional law. And that these various ways in which that's being eroded is why people get worried and scared about what is the future of our public fabric, right? Is our public fabric going to be more billionaire led and white Christian national billionaire led, or is it going to be a whole mix of different people who may not agree on every piece of the puzzle, but they figured out what they want this puzzle to look like so they can each benefit? And this is why watching the courts matters. And I this case in particular, though, right? Because like I said, this will hit home and reverberate not only in my family, but also in families around the country of how are you seen by the government? Do you count as a human in the same way as other people do? And I can tell you that most Palestinian people obviously don't feel like they count as humans. So it's a very interesting thing that it is a Palestinian ethnic person who has U.S. legal residency that is now going to end up challenging this process.
Ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes, so you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, perfect for any active, busy lifestyle. Lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto Meals. Based on a randomized, controlled clinical trial with Factor Keto, results will vary depending on diet and exercise. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. Choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, grab-and-go snacks, and more add-ons. Reach your goals this year with ingredients you can trust and convenience that can't be beat. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
Yeah, and I have a friend named Jamal Bryant who's a pastor in Atlanta, and I don't know if you remember this, but when they had the the Black History Month celebration at the White House, there were a couple of Instagram and TikTok posters who were up, and they had pictures of Jamal Bryant's face, and they were chanting his name at the White House in the East Room, saying, investigate Jamal Bryant, because for some reason these people had it in their craw that he was a critic of the president, and they wanted him investigated because he was doing it from the pulpit of his church. And so now you start encroaching, you want to start going after ministers who are supposed to be protected by the First Amendment and the separation of church and state because they have expressed an opinion about somebody who is not living up to their beliefs of how their religious values should be lived. So you go after immigrants, and then you go after ministers, and then you start going after lawyers, as the administration is doing. If you represent a client that they don't like, they want to punish you. Where does it stop? It doesn't stop until it gets to your doorstep.
We already know they're going after academic institutions, not just colleges. I mean, they're pulling funding from universities for all the amazing research that they could be doing. Again, funding that's necessary for innovation and science to grow. Would be nice if we had that. But also the Department of Education, the idea that federal funding for food programs, for education programs, that shouldn't exist. Getting rid of that. That also gets rid of the transparency then, because when you have federal funding, you get reporting back on what's going on in those schools that receive federal funding. So they don't want a national picture or, for us to have easy access to the data. They want to just tell us what's going on, what they think
That's right.
is the reality around us, right? Not for you to figure it out and understand it on your own. And that's what's going to make it really, really hard. I will say there was one example in Congress this week that I was happy to see. And even though we need more cameras on what goes on in Congress and more people watching, there was a committee, it was a subcommittee on like European affairs, but the first trans member of Congress was on that committee. And let's be clear, she was elected by her people under the name Sarah McBride. So I'm not walking in and saying who I think you are, what you should be. Her people elected her as their representative with the name Sarah McBride and with the pronouns she and her. So you start with that. The Republican chairman of the committee introduces her and he goes, Mr. McBride, you'll be speaking next. And the response goes, well, Madam Chair.
It's the meanness. I got to tell you, it's the meanness.
She goes, Madam Chair, which was a great clapback. But the best part was the ranking Democrat. So essentially her mentor, the person ahead of her in line as a Democrat, white male, cis male, speaks and goes, wait. Can you repeat that, Mr. Chairman? Can you repeat how you introduced the duly elected representative? And the guy repeats it. He goes, that is completely out of line and out of order for who we are. That is the duly elected representative. You need to use their name. And the Republican then adjourned the meeting. Like they literally had all these people ready to testify for operations and budget and all this. And he's like, nope, I'm out of here. We're done. And that's what I realized about the meanness.
It's the meanness.
When they are called on it, they have a hard time backing it up, right? Like any bully, they're called on it. But I loved that representative was not left to take care of the attack herself. The person with power on her team was like, no, wait a minute. I'm going to back this up for a second. And that, again, moments like that give me hope that people are starting to understand how to confront this challenge.
There is hope out there, and we want to keep focusing on it. Nayyera, it was good to talk to you. I know we're going to have a short episode this week, but I just wanted to get in and talk about this because this billionaire thing is really, I think it's growing. It's not going to stop. And if they don't figure out how they share some of the wealth,
not the billionaires themselves, so they are growing. The billionaires are growing. The anti-billionaire thing.
The anti-billionaire kind of anxiety and anger is growing. And we're setting ourselves up. This collision course that we're on feels like it's just accelerating.
We'll see what happens. Thank you, folks.